Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is moderation. I think as a culture, we're so acclimated to more is better. I want to just talk about what moderation can be because so often more is too much. And I think we're all experiencing that in one way or another in our lives. So I want to explore that together. But before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to settle in and get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it and imagine sparkling, clean, crisp oxygen flowing into your lungs and into your bloodstream and nourishing all your cells and all the organs of your body. And as you exhale, exhale any tension or any stress in your shoulders, your back, your body, anywhere that you find it. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose. Hold it, and this time imagine sparkling white light lighting up every molecule in your body and your being and connecting you with the world beyond. And now let's just gently press our palms together, softly, softly. Rub your fingers against your palms. Feel the tingling and the tickling and the deliciousness. And bring yourselves present right here, right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Kim Colsey. It's wonderful to have you here with us this morning. It's great to see you. And I'm so glad that everybody else is here as well. And let's talk about moderation because this is such a time of overwhelm for so many people. Too much to do, too many things to experience, uh, too much exposure. Uh, and we are really acclimated beyond ourselves, from a lot of outside input. We are acclimated to the notion that more is better. And uh, I have had this experience even with meditations where um, people have added all kinds of extra bells and whistles to improve a meditation, like chimes or tones or all kinds of things like that. And my experience, this actually happened where a program that I'm part of has the wonderful, wonderful meditations and materials, and recently released a new version of one of the meditations, and I actually found it to be too much. And there were chimes which were lovely, but they were too loud. They took too much of my attention. And what I noticed was I ended up getting jangled and uncomfortable. And the result of the meditation was opposite the intended result. And we were asked for feedback, so I was able to give the feedback, and apparently I wasn't alone in my feedback. But it just really made me start thinking about the notion of moderation, and more of a good thing becomes a bad thing too often, right? Like chocolate, for instance, for a lot of people. So, on the other side of this, more is better. We often go to the all or nothing kind of approach. Like I'm cutting that out from my diet, or I, because I tend to overindulge in it, and so it's either all or nothing. And I'm wondering if you find this conversation around moderation, how does it show up for you in your life where more is too much or it's either all or nothing? And how can we move into this place of conscious conscious choice, conscious moderation and modulation. I think that a lot of the more is better thing that results in some indulgent behaviors. I don't know, but I'm not thinking of a better word right now. Maybe overindulgent behaviors. How's that? Overindulgent behaviors, um, and uh, excessive patterns is because we're not tuning in. Like I used to have uh, challenges with overeating big time. I mean, to the point where at one time I actually joined Overeaters Anonymous. I didn't participate very much, but I joined because I had this eating compulsion. And when I think back on it, I realized that I wasn't tuning into myself. I wasn't present to my experience in those times when I was indulging in this behavior. It was kind of a compulsive behavior for me, and the notion of moderation not as a limit that we impose on ourselves, but as a place of presence that we can interact with our experience. So, what do you think about this? What do you think about moderation? When you think about moderation, do you go, ugh? Because, like initially, that's kind of my response is, moderation, because more is better after all, and I don't want the flat line of moderation. I want the peaks, and I want more. but but I realize, like stimulation, I think that we tend to get overstimulated, and moderation is for me, as I'm exploring it more consciously, moderation comes with presence, and presencing myself to my experience and honoring the feedback of my being and my body, because the tendency for so many of us is to push, 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 do more, more, more. How much can I cram into a day, kind of thing, instead of being able to tune in and see what's appropriate. Like, have I done enough? Is this enough? Do I have the need to say, okay, that's it for today? And so it's also about creating boundaries, or respecting boundaries, because the boundaries are there. We know when we've reached our limit. And the thing that I used to do pretty regularly was go beyond my limit. I would push myself past my limit, and I wouldn't realize it until I crashed after the fact. And I'm wondering, for you, how do you experience this notion of moderation and too much and not enough, and the black and white of all or nothing? I think that this is an opportunity to look at how we can tune in more deeply to ourselves and our inner moderator, and modulator, to get the feedback about where we are with things. You know, we've been enculturated to push ourselves beyond our limits, and I get that there's merit to that in lots of ways in terms of personal growth, to challenge yourself, to push beyond your perception of your limits, to recognize that you're unbounded. And I have done lots of that in my life, and I value that highly, like to take on a challenge that inspires you to stretch. And how do we find the balance? How do we find the balance in these things? I mean, the balance of extremes, the balance of challenge versus danger, maybe. I don't know. And we often perceive challenges as danger because we have a limited belief about that. So this is an interesting conversation, because I think that there are times for us to challenge our limits. I think that there's real merit in that and real value in that, and that's how we can grow and expand. But there are also places in our lives where too much or more is too much. Judy Drake, welcome, Judy. Thank you so much for commenting here. Judy says, I think our efforting is the need to feel some external validation of our worth. I'm getting better at finding that middle ground between all or nothing, but it's a process to recognize it and change it. Well worth it, though. Thank you. Thank you, Judy. That's beautifully, beautifully said. And I think that we do get to look at the external validation of our self worth. So when we identify with what we do or what we have, which most of us have been enculturated to do, to value ourselves based on externalities, how we look, what we own, what we do, what we produce, um, rather than recognizing, having a sense of worth that emanates from the inside out, uh, then we tend to overdo, I think. And I really have been living in this question around doingness, because that's how we have all been conditioned to recognize our value, and the doingness that we are is external. And what I encourage my coaching clients to is to focus, and it's really cool actually, because I'm seeing more of this out in the world, this message of coming from the place of beingness, and from that beingness the doing emerges. And when the doing emerges from the place of beingness versus an external valuation, which I'll talk about in a second, when it emerges from a place of beingness, then there's an alignment, and it's the doing is moving from inspiration, and it's a whole different thing. The doing becomes a side product of the being, and the transformation is from life as product to life as process. So when I talk about these externalities, I had a big conversation with one of my clients yesterday, and it was very, very profound, because this person was trained as an athlete, and so much of the athletic conditioning is about overcoming yourself, pushing beyond your limits, and also knowing when too much is too much. So the thing here is that it was always about the thing, like the marathon, or summiting the mountain, or um, getting the trophy. And when we focus on the thing as the outcome, we most often are not present to the process, and the thing becomes the reason. And then the problem with that is that when you get the thing, then you get to go to the next thing because that thing is over. Versus when you're in the process of moving in that direction, and the thing becomes evidence rather than the objective. And the trophy becomes a byproduct of the beingness that brought you to win it. The beingness of being an athlete, or um, being a winner, you know, being the presence of fully engaging in life. Then the doing becomes an outgrowth of that. And the fear that people encounter with this whole being and doing conversation is that if they focus on being, they won't do anything, and their life will be meaningless. And it's completely the opposite of that. Maybe counterintuitive because we're so conditioned elsewise, but by being in the presence, by presencing ourselves to our inner calling and our impulse for growth or transformation or expression, what shows up in the world as our doing is much more authentically generated and aligned with who we are. So, this brings us back to the conversation around moderation. Moderation, really, in this conversation, is connection with that inner voice, that inner life experience, and the middle ground. To get back to what you were saying, Judy, the middle ground between all or nothing is something that we can tune into more keenly and effectively when we connect with ourselves, because the all or nothing notion is one of control. From my vantage point at this moment, when we're doing all or nothing, we're putting external controls on things. And what we do by doing that is we inhibit a flow. Now, I realize that many of us struggle with addictive behaviors. And when that is the case, until we get to a point of inner balance, all or nothing does make sense, because nothing can save our lives, from because with an addictive pattern, we lose the facility to moderate and to be connected. So eliminating something completely can be a life-saving measure. So I'm not advocating moderation in cases where we don't have the internal structures to support that moderation. So again, it's not all or nothing. It's not all moderation, right? It's not all black and white. It's finding balance, finding a flow that enables us to function where we are. Um, I want to talk about this other thing that came up in this really profound conversation with a client yesterday that I was just talking about, the athlete. And there was a moment of revelation where they said, you know, if what you're saying is right, then the way that I've been living, I've wasted so much time. The way that I've been living is wrong. And it was it was a heartbreaking moment for me to witness the pain that they experienced with this interpretation. And I said, no, 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 no. It's not a matter at all of right or wrong here. This is, you have trained all your life to get to this point, to where you could understand and move into this next dimension of awareness and experience. And it's through this incredibly goal oriented training where you've enabled yourself to go beyond your limits, your perceptions of yourself, that you now have the capacity to make this leap. And I likened it to the transition from, for instance, middle school to high school, or high school to college, even, where you graduate. You know, you reach some, ideally, you reach some level of mastery, and then you get to go to this next level of evolution and awareness. And I think maybe a topic for another day will be wasted time, because I don't know if there is such a thing. And the whole notion of wasted time also goes into this doingness mentality. Well, topic for another day, right? Anyway, I'm wondering, what are you thinking about this whole moderation thing? And moderation in moderation too, right? um, I I always find, or very often find, in these musings that we kind of go around full circle to the being in the question rather than having pat answers. And it's in being in the inquiry with with life, being engaged in the inquiry rather than having the answers, that we get to experience so much more richness of life, I think. And even my beliefs, I entertain them as hypotheses, and sometimes, even entertain them as hypotheses, I sometimes get stuck in the dogma of them. But um, I wonder if being in the question for you is something that is opening up possibility and a richness of experience that you might not otherwise experience. I know it is for me. So if you don't have anything more to add this morning, I think I might wrap it up here. To just, let's look at what is moderation, and how can it serve us, and how can we find a connected place from which to moderate and modulate our experience to best serve us, to know when to push, and to know when to stop, and to know when to slow down or speed up. And I think it's all a matter of self connection and awareness. So, with that, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I'm here on Enlightened World Network every weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I love spending this time with you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope to see you again soon, maybe even tomorrow. And until then, lots and lots of love and lots of compassion.